A billionaire CEO decides to personally investigate one of his failing restaurants, disguised as an ordinary customer. In the middle of the meal, a 6-year-old girl hands him a secret note, revealing something disturbing. What first seemed like a simple child's game turns into clues of a multi-million-dollar scheme of corruption and blackmail. But it is the courage of that child that sparks a fight for justice, capable of changing lives and saving an empire. Chapter 1. The Man in the Suit. The sleek black Audi pulled into the parking lot of Harvest Table, one of the 37 restaurants in the Parker Culinary Group empire. William Parker adjusted his glasses. Plain frames with clear lenses that completed his disguise, along with casual clothes instead of his usual tailored suits. At 42, William, or Will as he preferred, had built his restaurant chain from a single Seattle food truck to a nationwide sensation. But something was wrong with this particular location. The quarterly reports showed a steady decline in profits, customer satisfaction scores had plummeted, and staff turnover had mysteriously tripled. As CEO, Will could have sent in auditors or management consultants, but his instincts told him this required a personal touch. Sometimes the only way to understand a problem was to experience it firsthand. "Table for one, please," Will said to the hostess, noting her frazzled appearance and forced smile. The restaurant was only half full on what should have been a busy Thursday evening. "Right this way, sir." The hostess led him to a small table near the back, perfectly positioned to observe both the dining room and the swinging doors to the kitchen. Will thanked her and accepted the menu, pretending to study it, while actually studying the restaurant's dynamics. The decor remained beautiful: warm woods, copper accents, and the signature living herb wall that was a hallmark of all Harvest Table locations. But something felt off. The staff moved with tension in their shoulders, conversations between servers seemed furtive, and the usual harmonious rhythm of a well-run restaurant was conspicuously absent. A blonde waitress approached his table, notepad in hand. Her name tag read Sarah, and despite her professional smile, Will noticed the dark circles under her blue eyes. "Welcome to Harvest Table. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Her voice was warm, but tired. "Just water for now, thanks." "And maybe your recommendation for tonight's specials?" Will asked, using his standard technique to engage with staff. Sarah's smile became more genuine. "The herb-crusted salmon is excellent. Chef Marcus still manages to work magic despite—" She caught herself. "Despite how busy we've been." That hesitation, the unfinished thought, confirmed Will's suspicions that something was seriously wrong. "Salmon sounds perfect," Will said. "I'll trust your judgment." As Sarah walked away, Will noticed a small figure peering around the corner from the staff break room. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, with blonde hair like Sarah's tied in 2 uneven pigtails. She was watching the dining room with unusual intensity for a child her age, her eyes moving methodically from table to table as if conducting her own investigation. When the girl's eyes met Will's, she didn't look away as most children would. Instead, she studied him with a seriousness that was both amusing and slightly disconcerting. Will smiled at her, and after a moment's consideration, she disappeared back into the break room. Sarah returned with his water. "Sorry for the wait. Thursday deliveries are always a bit chaotic." "No problem at all," Will assured her. "I couldn't help noticing, is that your daughter?" Sarah's expression shifted immediately to one of embarrassment and concern. "I'm so sorry about that. My babysitter cancelled last minute, and I couldn't find anyone else. My manager allowed her to stay in the break room just for tonight. I promise she won't disturb any guests." "She's not disturbing anyone," Will said quickly. "I was just curious. It must be difficult juggling work and parenthood." Relief washed over Sarah's face. "You have no idea. But we manage. Emily's very self-sufficient for her age. Too grown up sometimes, if I'm honest." Will nodded sympathetically. "I'm sure you're doing a great job." Sarah gave him a grateful look before heading to another table. Will continued his observations, noting how the restaurant manager, Robert Donovan, spent most of his time in his office rather than on the floor. Will recognized him from company photos, a rising star in the organization who had been transferred to this location 8 months ago to boost its performance. Instead, The restaurant's metrics had declined precipitously under his management. When his salmon arrived, Will was pleased to find the food quality remained excellent. At least the kitchen hadn't suffered. He was halfway through his meal when he felt a presence beside him. Looking down, he found Emily standing next to his table, her hands clasped behind her back. "Hello," Will said, surprised. Emily glanced around quickly, then slipped something onto his table, a folded piece of paper torn from a coloring book. Before Will could say anything else, she pressed her finger to her lips in a universal shh gesture and scurried away. Intrigued, Will carefully opened the note. In a child's uneven handwriting, it read, "Mr. Important Man, my mommy is in danger. The bad manager is doing secret bad things. He makes the numbers wrong and is very mean when nobody can see. Please help. I have more proof in my detective club notebook in the broom closet. Don't tell anyone I told you. Emily T." Will felt a chill despite the warm restaurant. He discreetly folded the note and slipped it into his pocket, his mind racing. Children often had active imaginations, but something about Emily's earnestness gave him pause. The specificity about making the numbers wrong was particularly concerning. Across the restaurant, Sarah was frantically looking around, her expression panicked, until she spotted Emily emerging from the restroom hallway, deliberately taking a different route back to the break room. Sarah's shoulders sagged with relief, unaware of her daughter's detour to Will's table. Will finished his meal quickly and asked for the check. When Sarah returned with it, he left a generous tip and a business card underneath the billfold. It wasn't his CEO card, but one he used for his food blog side project. William Wright, culinary enthusiast. "The salmon was excellent," Will told her. "You were right about the chef working magic." Sarah smiled, this time reaching her eyes. "Thank you. That means a lot. Chef Marcus deserves the credit." "I'd love to feature this place on my blog," Will added. "Would you mind if I came back and asked you a few questions about the restaurant sometime? You clearly know your way around the menu." She hesitated, clearly flattered but uncertain. I suppose that would be all right." "Great. My number's on the card, no pressure though." As Will stood to leave, he saw Robert Donovan emerge from his office, eyes narrowing at the sight of Sarah chatting with a customer. The manager's face was handsome but hard, with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. He headed toward them with purposeful strides. "Time to find that broom closet," Will murmured to himself, slipping away toward the restrooms. The narrow hallway led past the bathrooms to a service area. Will glanced back to ensure no one was watching, then tried the door marked supply closet. It opened easily. Inside, among mops and cleaning supplies, he spotted a child-sized plastic chair wedged in the corner, with a flashlight and a purple notebook partially hidden behind a stack of paper towels. The cover of the notebook was decorated with stickers and bore the words "Kitchen Detectives Club" in the same uneven handwriting as the note. Will hesitated only briefly before taking the notebook. He'd return it, of course, but first he needed to see if Emily's proof held any substance. He slipped the notebook into his jacket and made his way out through the side exit, unnoticed by the staff. In his car, Will opened the purple notebook and began to read. What he found inside made his blood run cold. Through the eyes of a 6-year-old, using drawings, misspelled words, and even glued scraps of receipts, Emily had unknowingly documented what appeared to be a systematic pattern of financial manipulation and staff intimidation. Will started his car, his mind made up. Tomorrow he would return, not as a customer, but as the owner. However, as he drove away, he failed to notice Robert Donovan watching his departure from the restaurant window, already scrolling through security footage on his tablet, his expression darkening as he zoomed in on Will's face. Chapter 2. The U. Detective's Notebook. The penthouse suite of the Parker Tower afforded Will a panoramic view of Seattle's skyline, but tonight he barely noticed the twinkling lights of the city he loved. Spread across his dining table was Emily's purple notebook, the Kitchen Detectives Club journal that had completely changed his understanding of the situation at Harvest Table. A 6-year-old had accomplished what his entire corporate audit team had missed. The notebook contained an assortment of childish drawings, notes in crayon, and various items taped to the pages. receipt fragments, overheard conversations transcribed in phonetic spelling, and even a staff schedule with certain shifts highlighted. Through Emily's innocent eyes, a troubling pattern emerged. "Mr. Rob makes the computer beep wrong when he does money stuff," read one entry, accompanied by a drawing of a stern-faced man at a computer with angry eyebrows. Another page held a collection of overheard phrases. "If you say anything, you'll never work in this industry again. The difference is my insurance policy. Parker doesn't care about this location anyway." Most concerning were the numbers. Emily had apparently been copying figures from papers she'd seen, creating columns of her own, detecting inconsistencies without understanding what they meant. Will reached for his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Olivia, I need you to clear my schedule tomorrow. Something's come up with Harvest Table Seattle." His chief of operations was used to his occasional hands-on interventions, but the urgency in his voice prompted immediate concern. "What's happening, Will?" Olivia Chen had been with him since the food truck days, the most trusted member of his executive team. "I'm not entirely sure yet, but I think Robert Donovan is deliberately running that location into the ground. I need to understand why before I confront him." "Do you want me to send in the auditors?" she asked. "No. This requires discretion. If word gets out that we're investigating him, he might destroy evidence or worse, intimidate the staff into silence." Will paused, thinking of Sarah and Emily. There are vulnerable people involved. After finishing the call, Will returned to the notebook, flipping to the last few pages. He stopped at a letter written in purple crayon on a page, decorated with hearts and stars. "Dear Dad, who isn't here," it began. "My name is Emily Taylor. I am 6 and 3/4 years old. Mom says you had to go away before I was born. Sometimes I pretend you are a secret agent or an astronaut. Mom works very hard. Sometimes she cries when she thinks I'm sleeping. I'm scared because the mean manager man might hurt her job. She needs her job. I wish you could come help us. Do you even know about me? Would you like me? I am good at spelling and detective work. Love, Emily." Will felt a lump in his throat. The letter hit uncomfortably close to home. His own father, though physically present, had been emotionally absent, too consumed with building his real estate empire to attend school plays or baseball games. Will had sworn to be different if he ever had children of his own. But at 42, with 3 failed relationships behind him, that dream seemed increasingly distant. His restaurants had become his children, his employees, his family. And now part of that family was in trouble. Morning brought a sense of purpose. Instead of his usual tailored suit, Will opted for business casual, authoritative enough to command respect, but not so formal as to intimidate the staff. His plan was simple: announce an impromptu visit as the CEO, observe Robert's reaction, and protect Sarah and Emily while gathering concrete evidence. When he arrived at Harvest Table, the lunch rush was just beginning. Will purposely entered through the main door, making no attempt to hide his identity. The hostess, the same young woman from the previous night, did a double take when she recognized him. "Mr. Parker, we had no idea you were coming. Should I get Mr. Donovan?" "Please do," Will said pleasantly. "And don't worry, this is just a routine visit. I like to drop in on different locations occasionally." The hostess scurried off, and Will could almost feel the ripple of tension spreading through the restaurant. From the corner of his eye, he spotted Sarah emerging from the kitchen, stopping abruptly when she saw him. Recognition dawned on her face, followed quickly by confusion, and then something like betrayal. She had obviously connected the dots between last night's food blogger and her actual boss. Before Will could approach her, Robert Donovan emerged from his office, his expression a careful mask of surprise and welcome. "Mr. Parker, what an unexpected pleasure." Robert extended his hand, smile firmly in place, though his eyes remained cold. "Had I known you were coming, I would have prepared a proper welcome." "That's precisely why I didn't announce myself, Robert." Will shook his hand firmly. "I like to see my restaurants as they really are, not just when they're prepared for inspection." Robert's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, would you like a tour? I can show you the improvements we've been implementing to address our recent challenges." "Absolutely. But first, I'd like to speak with your staff. The heart of any restaurant isn't its decor or even its food. It's the people who create the experience. Robert's eye twitched. Of course. Though I should mention we're rather short-staffed today and everyone's quite busy with the lunch service. I won't take much of their time, Will assured him, already moving toward the kitchen. The next hour was revealing. While Robert hovered anxiously, Will spoke with the chef, the line cooks, the dishwashers, and the waitstaff. Most seemed guarded, offering safe, generic answers to his questions about working conditions and restaurant operations. But he noticed how they glanced at Robert before responding, how their body language changed when the manager was nearby. Sarah avoided him entirely, finding reasons to remain on the opposite side of the restaurant. Each time their eyes met, she quickly looked away, her expression a mixture of anger and fear. Finally, Will cornered her by the beverage station. "Sarah, I need to speak with you." "I'm very busy, Mr. Parker," she said formally, not meeting his eyes as she arranged glasses on a tray. "I understand you're upset that I wasn't honest about my identity last night." Upset? Why would I be upset? That the CEO of the company was spying on us. Her voice was low but intense. Was this some kind of test? Are we all going to lose our jobs because the restaurant isn't performing well enough for you? "That's not why I'm here," Will said quietly. "And I need to return something to Emily, her notebook." Sarah's hands froze on the glasses. "What notebook?" "The purple one, from the supply closet." The color drained from Sarah's face. "How do you know about—" She stopped as realization dawned. "Emily gave you that note, didn't she? And you took her notebook?" Her voice rose slightly, drawing attention from nearby staff. "Please, just hear me out," Will urged. "Not here, after your shift. I have another job after this one. I clean offices downtown. Then I'll wait. This is important, Sarah. It's about protecting you and Emily." Something in his tone must have reached her because she finally met his gaze. "Fine. I finish here at 4 p.m. There's a coffee shop across the street. I can give you 15 minutes before I have to catch my bus." "Thank you." Will handed her a business card, his real one this time. "My direct line, in case anything changes." As Sarah took the card, Robert appeared beside them. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his tone pleasant but his eyes sharp. "Just getting to know my staff," Will said smoothly. "Sarah was telling me about your new table service protocol." "Was she?" Robert's gaze slid to Sarah. "I'm surprised she remembers it given how often she's late for our staff meetings." The implied threat wasn't subtle. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. "Actually," Will interjected, "Sarah was just explaining how difficult the new system is to implement with reduced staff. Perhaps we should discuss increasing the labor budget for this location." Robert's smile became strained. "I'd be happy to review the numbers with you in my office." "Excellent. And I'd like to see all the books, payroll, inventory, vendor contracts, everything." Will watched Robert carefully as he added, "I'm particularly interested in the discrepancies between reported food costs and actual inventory usage." A flicker of alarm passed through Robert's eyes before he controlled it. "Of course, though I should warn you, our filing system is in transition. It might take some time to gather everything." "I've got all day," Will assured him, "and tomorrow if necessary." As they walked toward the office, Will glanced back at Sarah, who was watching them with an unreadable expression. Whatever was happening at Harvest Table, he was now certain of one thing. Emily's childish detective work had uncovered something very real and potentially very dangerous for everyone involved. Behind them, unnoticed by either man, Emily peered out from the break room, her serious eyes following their movement, a new blue notebook clutched tightly in her small hands. Chapter 3. Trust Issues. The Rain City coffee shop lived up to Seattle's nickname, its large windows streaked with afternoon drizzle. Will arrived early, choosing a corner table that offered privacy, while allowing him to watch the door. He ordered 2 coffees and waited, Emily's purple notebook on the table beside him. At 4:15 p.m., the door opened and Sarah entered, scanning the cafe until she spotted him. Her hair was now pulled back in a neat ponytail, her Harvest Table uniform exchanged for jeans and a practical raincoat. The dark circles under her eyes seemed more pronounced in the cafe's harsh lighting. "You're still here," she said, sliding into the chair opposite him. It wasn't a question, but an observation tinged with surprise. I said I would be. Will pushed one of the coffees toward her. I took a guess. Medium latte. Sarah ignored the coffee. I have 13 minutes before my bus. Say what you need to say. Will placed Emily's notebook on the table between them. Your daughter has been conducting her own investigation at the restaurant. Did you know that? Sarah's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the familiar purple cover. Her detective. Club thing? I thought that was just a game she was playing. She reached for the notebook. She's always been imaginative. It started as a game, Will agreed, but Emily noticed things that adults might miss because they're too busy or too close to the situation. Sarah flipped through the notebook, her expression shifting from dismissive to concerned as she examined the contents. These are invoices, delivery schedules, staff meetings. She looked up at Will. How did she get all this? Children can be invisible when adults don't think they're paying attention, Will said. Emily is. Unusually perceptive for her age, and she's worried about you. Sarah turned to the letter Emily had written to her absent father, her eyes softening as she read. When she finished, she closed the notebook carefully. Mr. Parker. Will, please. Mr. Parker, she repeated firmly. I appreciate your concern, but whatever game you're playing, I can't afford to be involved. I have a daughter to support and 2 jobs that barely cover our rent and Emily's after-school program. If Robert is doing something unethical, that's between you and him. It's not that simple, Will said. If what Emily has documented is accurate, Robert has been systematically undermining the restaurant, altering financial records, intimidating staff, and possibly worse. And based on what I saw today, I believe she's right. Then fire him, Sarah said bluntly. You're the CEO, problem solved. Without proper evidence, firing him could lead to a wrongful termination lawsuit. And if he's been falsifying records as extensively as I suspect, we need to understand exactly what he's done to fix it. Sarah checked her watch. 7 minutes, get to the point. I need your help, Will said simply. You've worked at Harvest Table longer than anyone except Chef Marcus. You see everything that happens on the floor. Staff trust you. If Robert E. is creating a hostile work environment or manipulating the books, you're my best chance of proving it. You want me to spy on my boss? Sarah let out a short, incredulous laugh. Do you have any idea how precarious my situation is? I'm a single mother with no safety net. If I lose this job, you won't, Will assured her. I give you my word. Whatever happens, your position is secure. Your word, Sarah's voice was flat. Like the word you gave when you pretended to be a food blogger last night? Will winced. I deserved that. But I'm being completely honest with you now. Sarah stood, gathering her purse and Emily's notebook. My bus leaves in 4 minutes. Thank you for the coffee I didn't drink. Sarah, wait. Will reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, scribbling something on the back. This is my personal cell number. If you change your mind, or if you ever feel unsafe at work, call me. Anytime, day or night. She hesitated before taking the card. Why do you care so much about one struggling restaurant? Don't you have 36 others to worry about? 37, actually. And I care because Harvest Table isn't just a restaurant to me. It was my 3rd location, the first one I opened after my initial success. I designed every detail, from the living herb wall to the copper light fixtures. Will's passion was evident in his voice. But more importantly, I care about the people who work for me, all of them. Sarah studied him for a moment, then slipped the card into her pocket. I have to go. Will watched her leave, hoping he'd made some progress in gaining her trust. Outside, the rain had intensified, and he saw Sarah run toward the bus stop, pulling her hood up against the downpour. The following morning, Will arrived at his corporate headquarters earlier than usual. He needed to brief his inner circle before proceeding with his investigation of Robert Donovan. Olivia Chen was already waiting in his office, along with Theo Washington, his chief financial officer, and Miguel Vega, his head of legal. The 3 of them formed the backbone of Parker Culinary Group, having been with Will since the early days. I hope this is important, Theo said, checking his watch. I've got the quarterly projections meeting in an hour. It is, Will assured him, distributing copies of a report he'd prepared, carefully excluding Emily's involvement. "I believe Robert Donovan has been deliberately sabotaging our Seattle Harvest Table location." Olivia frowned as she scanned the document. Falsified inventory reports, staff intimidation. Will, these are serious accusations. "And potentially illegal," Miguel added, his legal mind already assessing liabilities. "Do we have concrete evidence?" "Not yet," Will admitted, "but the patterns are clear. Food costs reported at 42% when industry standard is 28 to 32%. Staff turnover tripled in 8 months. Customer complaints up to 15%. Devil's advocate," Theo interjected. "Maybe he's just a bad manager, incompetent, not malicious." "I considered that," Will said. "But look at his history. Before Seattle, Robert managed our Portland location, one of our top performers. Before that, Chicago, also excellent. He knows how to run a successful restaurant." "So why tank this one?" Olivia asked the question they were all thinking. "That's what I need to find out. And I need your help." Will outlined his plan: a thorough but discreet investigation, digital forensics on the restaurant's computer systems, and a deep dive into Robert's personal and professional background. "We need to move carefully," Miguel cautioned. "If he realizes we're investigating him, he could destroy evidence or worse, try to preemptively discredit you. Which is why I need to stay close to the situation," Will said. "I'm going back to Seattle tomorrow. Officially, I'm doing a hands-on evaluation of the restaurant to understand its challenges. Unofficially, I'll be watching Robert and trying to gain the trust of the staff. Particularly this waitress," Theo noted, pointing to Sarah's name in the report. "You seem to think she's key to understanding what's happening." Will nodded, ignoring the knowing look Olivia gave him. His chief of operations had witnessed his past relationships crash and burn as he prioritized work over personal life. "Just be careful," Olivia said, "both with the investigation and with personal entanglements." "This is strictly professional," Will insisted, though the image of Sarah's tired but determined face flashed in his mind. As the meeting concluded, Will felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever Robert was doing, Will would stop it. He had built his company on principles of integrity and respect, values that had been sorely tested in recent years as rapid expansion strained the corporate culture. Perhaps this situation was a wake-up call, a chance to reassess what truly mattered. The Seattle rain had given way to unusual autumn sunshine when Will arrived at Harvest Table the next day. He'd called ahead this time, informing Robert of his visit to help implement improvements. The forced cheerfulness in the manager's voice couldn't mask his unease. Will was greeted by a noticeably different atmosphere. Staff moved with artificial enthusiasm. The restaurant gleamed from a hasty deep clean, and Robert hovered attentively, clipboard in hand. "We've prepared a detailed report of our challenges and proposed solutions," Robert said, handing Will a professionally bound document. "As you'll see, we've been battling several external factors: road construction limiting access, a new competitor 2 blocks away, and supplier issues unique to this region." Will accepted the report with a nod. "Very thorough. I'd like to start by observing a full service cycle, from pre-opening prep to closing procedures." Robert's smile faltered slightly. "Of course, though that's a 14-hour day. Surely you don't intend to—" "Every minute," Will confirmed. "I want to understand exactly what's happening here." As they toured the kitchen, Will spotted Sarah instructing a new server on the point-of-sale system. Their eyes met briefly before she turned away, her posture stiffening. "Sarah seems to have leadership qualities," Will observed casually. "Has she expressed interest in management training?" Robert's laugh was dismissive. "Sarah? No, she's reliable. Enough as a server, but she lacks the education and polish for management. Plus, her situation with her daughter makes her scheduling problematic." Will noted the thinly veiled prejudice in Robert's assessment, but kept his expression neutral. Sometimes the best leaders come from unexpected places. The day progressed with Will shadowing different staff members, asking questions and taking notes. He observed Robert's management style, charming with customers, controlling with staff, and noticeably anxious whenever Will examined operational details too closely. By late afternoon, Will found a moment alone with Sarah as she restocked the service station. "How's Emily?" he asked quietly. "Fine," Sarah replied, not looking up from the napkins she was folding. She asked about her notebook. "Did you tell her I had it?" "I told her you borrowed it because you were interested in her detective stories." Sarah finally met his gaze. "She wants to know if you liked them." Will smiled. "Very much. She's quite observant." Sarah glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I thought about what you said. I'm not agreeing to help you, but—" She hesitated. "There's something you should see after closing. The restaurant's computer system does something strange every Tuesday night during the backup process." "What kind of strange?" "I don't know computers well enough to explain it, but numbers change. I've seen it happen when I've stayed late to help with inventory." Sarah returned to her napkin folding. "That's all I'm saying for now." Will nodded, understanding her caution. "I'll be here." As he walked away, he didn't notice Emily watching. From her hiding place behind the host stand, her blue notebook opened to a fresh page, carefully documenting this new development in her ongoing investigation. Chapter 4. Hidden Agendas. The restaurant had emptied of customers and most of the staff had departed. Only Chef Marcus remained in the kitchen, prepping for tomorrow while Sarah finished her closing duties. Robert had reluctantly left after Will insisted he needed to speak with the late shift employees alone, a transparent excuse that Robert couldn't refuse without appearing suspicious. Will sat at the manager's computer, Sarah standing nervously behind him. The office was small, dominated by a desk cluttered with invoices, schedules, and vendor catalogs. "It's almost midnight," Sarah said, checking her watch. "The system automatically runs its backup at 12:15. "Does Robert usually stay for this?" Will asked, studying the ancient accounting software that corporate had replaced everywhere else years ago. "No. He sets it up, then leaves. But twice I've been here late. Once when Emily was sick and I was making up missed hours, and once during inventory. Both times I saw the same thing." Will nodded, eyes on the screen. "How's Emily tonight?" "With Mrs. Castillo next door. I told her I had to. Work late." Sarah twisted her hands together. "I should be there with her. She has school tomorrow." "I appreciate you doing this," Will said sincerely. "I know what it costs you." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Emily likes you, you know." She asked, "If you were going to help us like in her detective books, where the good guy always saves the day." Will smiled, though the responsibility of a child's faith weighed heavily. "I'm trying." At precisely 12:15, the computer emitted a series of beeps as the backup program initiated. Will watched intently as the progress bar slowly advanced across the screen. "Wait for it," Sarah whispered. At 80% completion, something unusual happened. The screen flickered, and a secondary program launched in the background. Had Will not been watching carefully, he might have missed it, a rapid series of database adjustments executing automatically. "There," Sarah pointed. "That's what I saw before." Will's fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to capture the changes occurring in real time. "It's altering the financial records during the backup process. Clever. The original data is replaced before it's archived, so there's no record of the changes." The program completed its work and disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving no trace except for the modified database. "Can you tell what it changed?" Sarah asked, leaning closer. "It's sophisticated," Will admitted, "but based on what I can see, it's systematically skimming from reported sales while inflating expenses. Small amounts that add up over time." "So Robert is stealing?" Sarah's voice was hushed. "Not exactly. He's making the restaurant look unprofitable on paper." Will turned to face her. "Which doesn't make sense if his goal is embezzlement. He's deliberately tanking the restaurant's performance metrics." "Why would he do that?" "That's what we need to find out." Will pulled out his phone and sent a text to his IT security team. "We need to extract the original data and track these modifications. But we have to be careful. If Robert realizes we've discovered his program, he might destroy the evidence." Sarah crossed her arms, shivering slightly despite the warm office. "This feels dangerous, Will." It was the first time she'd used his first name, he realized. "I won't let anything happen to you or Emily," he promised, meaning it more than she could know. "You can't guarantee that." Her voice held no accusation, just pragmatic reality. Rich men always think they can control everything. Will stood, facing her directly. "You're right. I can't guarantee perfect safety, but I can promise I'll do everything in my power to protect you both. And my power is considerable." Something in his tone must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. "I should get home to Emily." "I'll drive you," Will offered. "No need. My car's in the lot." Will raised an eyebrow. "You have a car, but take the bus. Gas is expensive. I only drive when I absolutely have to, like tonight when I knew I'd be out late." She grabbed her purse from the desk. "Besides, the bus drops me closer to Emily's school." Will admired her practicality and resourcefulness. "Let me walk you. To your car, at least." In the darkened parking lot, Will waited as Sarah unlocked an aging Honda Civic, its blue paint faded and one fender visibly dented. As she opened the door, a child's booster seat was visible in the back, surrounded by coloring books and small toys, evidence of Emily's presence. "Thank you for tonight," Will said. "You've given us a crucial lead." Sarah paused before getting, "Teos, what happens now?" "I need to understand Robert's motivation. This goes beyond simple mismanagement. He's deliberately sabotaging the restaurant, and I need to know why." "Be careful," Sarah warned. "Robert can be intimidating when he feels cornered." Will nodded, watching as she drove away, her taillights disappearing into the misty Seattle night. The next morning found Will in his hotel room, surrounded by documents spread across the bed. He'd been up most of the night reviewing Robert Donovan's employment history, personnel file and performance evaluations. Something nagged at him, a pattern he couldn't quite identify. His phone rang, displaying Olivia's name. "Tell me you have something," Will answered. "Oh, I have something." "All right," Olivia replied. "Our IT team analyzed the backup files you sent. They confirmed the manipulation program has been running for 7 months. But here's the interesting part. Similar code was found at 2 other restaurants in our group, both previously managed by Robert Donovan." Will sat up straighter. "Portland and Chicago?" "No. Surprisingly, those were clean. It was Denver and Phoenix, locations he filled in temporarily during management transitions." Will frowned. The picture was becoming more complex. "And both those locations showed performance issues during his tenure? Denver recovered after he left. Phoenix is still struggling. There's something bigger happening here," Will mused. "Olivia, I need you to dig deeper into Robert's background, before he joined us, during his time with us. Everything. Already on it. And Will, Miguel is concerned about potential liability if Robert has been manipulating financial data. It could affect our tax filings, investor reports." "One problem at a time," Will said, though he shared the concern. "Anything else?" Olivia hesitated. "Just be careful. If Robert realizes you're onto him, there's no telling how he might react." After ending the call, Will returned to the documents, determined to find the missing piece. Hours later, his persistence paid off. Buried in Robert's initial employment application was a brief mention of his previous employer, Hartwell Restaurant Group, a regional competitor that had gone bankrupt 5 years ago. Will quickly searched for information about Hartwell and found himself looking at a corporate scandal that had largely flown under the national radar. The CEO had been accused of mismanagement and forced to sell off restaurant assets at a fraction of their value. The primary beneficiary, Midwest Hospitality Consortium, a conglomerate known for aggressive acquisition tactics. A suspicion began to form in Will's mind. He placed another call to Olivia. "I need everything we have on Midwest Hospitality Consortium," he said when she answered, "particularly any recent acquisition attempts or expansion plans in our markets." "Midwest? They approached us last year about buying our Seattle locations," Olivia recalled. "You turned them down flat. And now one of those locations is mysteriously failing," Will said grimly. "I think I'm starting to understand what's happening here." At Harvest Table, the lunch service was in full swing when Will arrived. He spotted Sarah immediately, efficiently managing her section while keeping a watchful eye on Emily, who sat in a corner booth doing homework. School must have ended early today, Will surmised. Robert was nowhere to be seen, which suited Will perfectly. He needed more information before confronting the manager. Will made his way to Emily's table, approaching with a friendly smile. "Mind if I join you, detective?" Emily looked up from her math worksheet, her serious expression brightening slightly. "Did you like my notebook?" "Very much," Will said, sliding into the booth opposite her. "You're quite observant." "That's an important skill for a detective." Emily nodded solemnly. "Mom gave it back to me. She said you borrowed it for research." "That's right. I hope you don't mind." Emily shrugged. "It's okay. I started a new one." She patted her backpack protectively. "This one has code so bad guys can't read it." Will couldn't help but smile at her precociousness. "Very smart. Can I ask you something, Emily? How long have you been watching Mr. Donovan?" Emily considered the question carefully. "Since Easter. He was mean to Miss Jackie and made her cry. That's when I started my detective club." "Jackie? Was she a server here?" "She was the assistant manager. Mr. Rob made her quit." Emily lowered her voice. "He said he had pictures of her doing bad things, but she said she didn't do them." Will kept his expression neutral despite his alarm. "I see. Did you ever tell your mum about this?" Emily shook her head. "Mum works really hard. I don't want to make her sad with bad stuff." The child's protectiveness toward her mother touched Will deeply. "That's very considerate of you, but sometimes adults need to know about bad things so they can fix them." "Are you going to fix the restaurant?" Emily asked, her blue eyes serious. Again. "Mum really needs this job. We're saving for a better apartment where I can have my own room." "I'm going to try my very best," Will promised. From across the restaurant, Sarah approached, concern evident in her expression. "Emily, you're supposed to wait until I come to your table." "It's okay, Mom," Emily said. "Mr. Will is helping with my detective case." Sarah's eyes darted nervously around the restaurant. "Mr. Parker is very busy, honey. He doesn't have time for games." "It's not a game," Emily insisted, but fell silent at her mother's warning look. "I was just keeping Emily company," Will explained, standing, "but I should check on the kitchen. Chef Marcus mentioned some equipment issues yesterday." As he walked away, Will heard Emily ask, "Mom, why are you mad? Mr. Will is the good guy." "It's complicated, sweetie," came Sarah's tired reply. "Sometimes even good guys can cause problems without meaning to." The words stung more than Will expected. He had barged into their lives, disrupting their careful balance. If his suspicions about Robert were correct, he might be putting them at risk. Yet doing nothing was no longer an option, not with evidence mounting of a coordinated effort to undermine his business and possibly harm his employees. In the kitchen, Will found Chef Marcus battling with an underperforming convection oven. "Third time it's acted up this month," Marcus complained. "I've requested repairs twice, but Robert says corporate denied the expense." "That's not true," Will said, examining the oven. "Maintenance requests come directly to operations, and Olivia would never deny essential kitchen repairs." Marcus wiped his brow with a towel. "That's what I figured. Robert's been cutting corners everywhere. Quality ingredients substituted for cheaper alternatives, reduced cleaning services, delayed maintenance. It's like he wants this place to fail." "I'm beginning to think that's exactly what he wants," Will murmured. "Marcus, how long have you known Robert?" "Since he took over here. Why? Has he ever mentioned Hartwell Restaurant Group or Midwest Hospitality?" Marcus thought for a moment. "Not specifically, but he did say once that you can't trust big restaurant groups, that they chew people up and spit them out when they're no longer useful." Will nodded, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. "I need to ask a favor, Marcus. Don't mention this conversation to Robert. I'm working on something that might explain what's been happening here." "You got it, boss," Marcus agreed. "Whatever's going on, I just want to get back to running a proper kitchen." As Will left the kitchen, he spotted Robert entering the restaurant, engaged in an intense phone conversation. The manager's face was flushed with anger, his free hand gesticulating emphatically. Will ducked behind a partition, straining to hear. "I don't care what it takes," Robert was saying. "The timeline has moved up. Parker's been here for 2 days. Already. No, he doesn't suspect anything, but he's asking questions. Yes, I've been careful, but—" He stopped abruptly, noticing a server watching him. "I'll call you back." Will retreated to the restroom, his mind racing. The timeline had moved up. Whatever Robert was planning was accelerating because of Will's presence. He needed to act quickly, but he still lacked concrete proof of Robert's intentions. As he washed his hands, Will caught sight of his reflection, the determined set of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes. He barely recognized himself. The corporate executive had been replaced by something more primal, a protector, a hunter. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about Sarah and Emily, about Chef Marcus and every other employee being manipulated in a game they didn't even know they were playing. Will pulled out his phone and called Olivia. "I need everything expedited and send Miguel to Seattle. We're moving to Phase 2. Chapter 5. The Perfect Storm. The skies over Seattle had darkened to a threatening gray by mid-afternoon, reflecting Will's mood as he sat in his hotel suite with Miguel Vega and 2 IT security specialists. Laptops and documents covered every surface as they built their case against Robert Donovan. "It's an impressive scheme," Miguel admitted, adjusting his glasses. Robert systematically degraded the restaurant's performance while creating a digital paper trail that would absolve him of responsibility. "And make corporate the villain," added Layla, the head of IT security. "According to these altered records, you denied legitimate requests for repairs, staff increases, and quality ingredients." Will nodded grimly. "Setting me up as the uncaring corporate boss who drove the restaurant into the ground through neglect and cost-cutting." "But why?" Miguel asked. "What's the endgame?" Will pushed a folder across the table. "Midwest Hospitality. Consortium. They've been aggressively expanding in the Pacific Northwest. 6 months ago, they approached one of our investors about buying our Seattle locations. I remember," Miguel said. "We declined. But if the restaurants were failing, particularly our flagship Seattle location, the board might reconsider." Will tapped another document. "Midwest hired a new director of acquisitions 9 months ago. Care to guess who it is?" Miguel scanned the paper, his eyebrows rising. "James Hartwell, former CEO of Hartwell Restaurant Group." "Where Robert worked before joining us," Will confirmed. "The company Hartwell ran into the ground before its assets were acquired by—" "Midwest," Miguel finished, the connections becoming clear. "So Robert is working with his former boss to sabotage your restaurants, driving down their value so Midwest can acquire them cheaply." "It's corporate sabotage," Will said, "and based on what we found in Denver and Phoenix, this isn't their first attempt." Layla frowned at her laptop screen. "We've recovered emails between Robert and an unnamed contact discussing the Seattle strategy. They're careful never to explicitly state their intentions, but the implication is clear." "Is it enough for legal action?" Will asked Miguel. The CCI lawyer spread his hands. "It's circumstantial. Strong enough for a civil case possibly, but criminal charges would be a stretch without more direct evidence." "Which we might never get," Will said frustratedly. "They're too careful." "There is another approach," Miguel suggested. "Set a trap. Let Robert think his plan is working. If Midwest makes a formal acquisition offer based on falsified performance data, we'd have them on record attempting to benefit from corporate espionage." Will considered this. "Too risky. It could take months, and meanwhile the restaurant continues to suffer. The staff continues to suffer." Sarah and Emily's faces flashed in his mind. "Then we need Robert to incriminate himself," Layla said. "Get him to admit what he's doing on record." A loud thunderclap punctuated her words as the storm outside intensified. Will's phone buzzed with a weather alert, severe thunderstorm warning for the Seattle area. "I need to get to the restaurant," Will said, standing suddenly. "Robert seemed agitated yesterday about my continued presence. Whatever he's planning, I think he's accelerating the timeline." "We should call the local authorities," Miguel suggested. "And tell them what? That we have circumstantial evidence of corporate espionage? They won't act without something more concrete." Will was already gathering his coat. "Keep working." Find me something I can use against him directly. The rain was coming down in sheets when Will's car pulled into Harvest Table's parking lot. The restaurant appeared unusually quiet for early evening service, the windows fogged with condensation, against the chill outside. Inside, Will immediately sensed something was wrong. The dining room was half empty with only 2 servers visible. Neither was Sarah. Will approached the hostess, a college-aged girl who looked harried. "Where's Sarah Taylor?" "She called in sick," the hostess replied, along with 3 other servers. "We're seriously understaffed tonight." Will frowned. Sarah hadn't mentioned any illness when he'd seen her the previous day. "And Robert?" "In his office. He's been there all afternoon." Will headed directly to the manager's office, not bothering to knock before entering. Robert looked up from his computer, surprise quickly masked by a professional smile. "Will, I wasn't expecting you tonight." "Clearly," Will said, closing the door behind him. "Half your staff is missing, including Sarah Taylor." Robert shrugged. "Food poisoning, apparently. Some staff party I wasn't invited to." His tone was light, but his eyes remained watchful. "These things happen." "Convenient timing," Will observed. "Just when I've been asking questions about financial discrepancies." Robert's smile tightened. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "Think you know exactly what I'm implying." Will moved closer to the desk. "Tell me, how long have you been working with James Hartwell?" A flicker of alarm crossed Robert's face before he controlled it. "James Hartwell? The name sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't believe I know him. Strange, since you worked for him at Hartwell Restaurant Group before joining us." "That was years ago. I barely remember my time there." Will placed both hands on the desk, leaning forward. "Stop lying, Robert. We know about the program that alters the financial records during backups. We know about your communications regarding the Seattle strategy. We know you've been deliberately sabotaging this restaurant to drive down its value for a Midwest acquisition." Robert's expression hardened. "Prove it." The challenge hung in the air between them. Will had pushed too hard without enough concrete evidence, and they both knew it. After a moment, Robert leaned back in his chair. "Look, Will, I understand you're concerned about this location's performance. That's why you're here, after all. But these wild accusations are beneath you. If you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, present it. Otherwise, I have a restaurant to run during a staff shortage." Will straightened, recognizing the stalemate. "This isn't over." "No," Robert agreed, his tone suddenly cold. "It isn't." As Will turned to leave, his phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from Sarah, sent to the personal number he'd given her. "Need to talk. Not sick. Something happened. Meet at Rain City. Coffee ASAP." Will felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. He glanced back at Robert, who was watching him with calculated calmness. "Enjoy your evening, Will," Robert said pleasantly. "Drive carefully. The roads are treacherous in this weather." The implied threat wasn't subtle. Will left without another word, hurrying through the rain to his car. Rain City Coffee was nearly deserted when Will arrived, the storm keeping most customers at home. Sarah sat in the same corner table they'd used before, her hands wrapped around a mug, her face pale and drawn. "What happened?" Will asked, sliding into the seat opposite her. "Robert knows," Sarah said without preamble. "He knows I helped you." Will's stomach tightened. "How?" "I don't know, but he called me this morning, said there was a private event tonight and they didn't need me. Then an hour ago I got this." She pushed her phone across the table. The text message was simple. "I know what you and Parker are doing. Consider your position terminated. Cross me again and your daughter's school will receive an anonymous tip about her living conditions." "What living conditions?" Will asked, confused. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Our apartment, it's not great. The building's been cited for code violations multiple times. Technically, it's not considered suitable for children, but it's all I can afford in a neighborhood where Emily can attend a decent school. He's threatening to call child protective services," Will realized, anger building in his chest. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "I can't lose Emily. She's everything to me." "That won't happen," Will promised. Where is she now? With Mrs. Castillo next door. I told her I had a job interview. Will reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. Listen to me. Robert is desperate. He knows we're close to exposing him. That's why he's resorting to threats. What does he want? Why is he doing this? Will explained what they'd discovered. Robert's connection to Hartwell, the corporate sabotage, the planned acquisition by Midwest. So our jobs, our livelihoods, were just collateral damage in some corporate game. Sarah's sadness gave way to anger. Yes, but we're going to stop him, Will assured her. We just need evidence that will stand up in court. Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at it, her face paling further. It's Mrs. Castillo. Will watched as Sarah answered, her expression changing from concern to alarm in seconds. When? How long ago? Sarah was already standing, gathering her purse. I'll be right there. What's wrong? Will asked as she ended the call. Emily's gone. Mrs. Castillo went to check on her and found the apartment door open. She thought Emily was with me. Will's blood ran cold. Could she have gone somewhere on her own? A friend's house? In this storm? No. Emily's terrified of thunder. Sarah was moving toward the door, panic evident in every movement. I have to find her. I'm coming with you, Will said, following her into the rain. They took Will's car, racing through the storm-lashed streets toward Sarah's apartment building. Will tried to keep his voice calm despite his growing dread. When did Mrs. Castillo last see Emily? About an hour ago. She gave her dinner, then went to her own apartment to watch her shows. She only checked back because of the thunder. She knows Emily gets scared. Sarah was gripping the door handle so tightly her knuckles were white. This is my fault. I should have been there. Don't blame yourself, Will said firmly. We don't know what happened yet. But as they pulled up to the rundown apartment building, Will had a sickening suspicion that Robert Donovan was somehow involved. The threat against Sarah had escalated too quickly to be coincidence. Mrs. Castillo, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a worried expression, met them at the entrance. I've looked everywhere, she said in accented English. The building, the playground, even the laundry room, nothing. Sarah was already running up the stairs to their third-floor apartment, Will close behind. The apartment door stood ajar, revealing a small, meticulously clean living space. Despite the building's obvious disrepair, Sarah had created a warm home, walls decorated with Emily's artwork, bookshelves filled with children's literature, a small table set for two. Emily, Sarah called, rushing from room to room, though the apartment was barely large enough to warrant the search. Emily, are you here? Will noticed something on the small kitchen table, a piece of notebook paper with childish handwriting. Sarah, look at this. She grabbed the paper, reading aloud. Mum, Mr. Rob called and said you were in trouble at the restaurant. He's taking me to find you. Don't worry. Love, Emily. Sarah's legs seemed to give way as she sank into a chair. He has my daughter. Will pulled out his phone, his mind racing. This crosses a line. We're calling the police. And tell them what? Sarah asked, her voice hollow. That my boss who fired me took my daughter to find me? They'll say he was being helpful. Then we'll find them ourselves, Will said decisively. Robert doesn't know that we know. He must have taken Emily to the restaurant thinking you'd go there looking for her. Sarah stood, a new determination in her eyes. Let's go. As they rushed back to the car, Will's phone rang. Miguel. Not now, Will answered curtly. Yes, now, Miguel insisted. We found something. Robert's been communicating with someone at Midwest using an encrypted messaging app. Our team managed to access his account remotely. They're planning to meet tonight at Harvest Table after closing. Something about finalizing the Seattle arrangement and addressing the Parker problem. Miguel, he's taken Sarah's daughter. A sharp intake of breath. What? That's kidnapping. We're heading to the restaurant now. Call the police. Tell them everything. The corporate espionage, the threats, everything. I'll handle Robert until they arrive. Will, wait for the authorities. Don't. Will ended the call, turning to Sarah as they reached the car. They're at the restaurant. Miguel is calling the police. The fear in Sarah's eyes was overshadowed by a mother's fierce determination. Drive fast. Chapter: Confrontation. The storm had intensified, turning Seattle's streets into rushing rivers. Will's windshield wipers worked frantically against the downpour as he navigated toward Harvey's table, one hand steady on the wheel, the other occasionally reaching to reassure Sarah. "She'll be okay," he said, though uncertainty gnawed at him. "Robert wouldn't harm her. He's using her as leverage, nothing more." Sarah stared straight ahead, her face a mask of barely contained terror and rage. "If he's touched a single hair on her head—" Will's phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. "Olivia." "Miguel filled me in," she said without preamble. "Police are on their way to the restaurant, but they're dealing with multiple emergencies because of the storm. ETA is 20 minutes at best." "We'll be there in 5, Will replied. "Will, listen to me. Wait for the police. Robert isn't alone. Our intelligence suggests James Hartwell himself may be there for this meeting." "Emily can't wait," Will said firmly, "but I need you to do something. The restaurant's security cameras. Can you access them remotely?" "Already trying," Olivia confirmed. "The system should connect to our corporate network, but something's blocking it. Robert may have disabled the connection." "Keep trying. And Olivia, record everything if you get through." As they approached Harvey's table, Will pulled into a side street, parking some distance from the restaurant. "Why are we stopping here?" Sarah asked anxiously. "We need to be strategic," Will explained. "If Robert sees us coming, he might panic. We need to find Emily first." The restaurant appeared, closed, its windows dark except for a faint light from the back office. The staff parking lot held only 2 vehicles, Robert's BMW and an unfamiliar luxury sedan with rental car plates. "Hartwell," Will murmured. "He's here." They approached cautiously through the rain, moving toward the kitchen's delivery entrance, which was less likely to be locked after hours for late deliveries. Will tried the handle. It opened. "Stay behind me," he whispered to Sarah, who nodded grimly, her focus absolute. The kitchen was dark and silent, the stainless steel surfaces gleaming dully in the emergency exit lights. They moved quietly through the space, pausing at the swinging doors that led to the dining room. Through the small windows in the doors, they could see the darkened restaurant, empty of customers and staff. A shaft of light spilled from the partially open office door, accompanied by the low murmur of male voices. "Where's Emily?" Sarah whispered, scanning the shadows desperately. Will strained to listen to the conversation. "Acquisition offer will be presented to the board next week," a voice Will didn't recognize was saying. "With the quarterly numbers in free fall, they'll have little choice but to accept." "Parker suspects something," came Robert's reply. "He confronted me earlier. Today." "Suspects isn't the same as knows," the other man, presumably Hartwell, responded dismissively. "And even if he does, it's too late. The damage is done. This location's reputation is in tatters, staff morale is destroyed, and customer loyalty has evaporated. A brilliant execution, Robert." "Thank you, sir. I learned from the best." Their smug satisfaction made Will's blood boil. Years of work, dozens of livelihoods, all treated as collateral damage in their corporate game. Sarah tugged at his sleeve, pointing toward the break room. The door was closed, but a thin strip of light showed beneath it. They crept across the dining room, staying low and using the tables as cover. When they reached the break room, Will eased the door open slowly. Emily sat at the small table, her blue notebook open before her, crayon in hand. She looked up, her eyes widening at the sight of her mother. "Mommy," she whispered excitedly. Sarah rushed to her daughter, enveloping her in a fierce hug, tears streaming down her face. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Emily shook her head. "Mr. Robb said you were in trouble and needed help, but when we got here he told me to wait and be quiet. I knew something was wrong, so I pretended to be scared of the storm and said I wanted to color in here." Will marveled at the child's instinctive understanding of the situation. "Smart thinking, detective." Emily beamed at the praise. "I wrote down everything in my new notebook, for evidence." "We need to get out of here," Will said quietly, "now while they're still talking." Sarah nodded, gathering Emily into her arms. "The delivery entrance?" "Too risky. They might hear the door. Will glanced around the break room, his eyes settling on the small window near the ceiling. That leads to the side alley. It's small, but Emily could fit through, then she could unlock the side door for us. Sarah looked dubious. I don't know. I can do it, Mummy, Emily said, with the confidence of a child who didn't fully grasp the danger. I'm good at climbing. Before they could decide, the break room door swung fully open. Robert Donovan stood in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to cold calculation. Well, this is an unexpected family reunion, he said, his voice dangerously soft. Sarah, Will, how nice of you to join us. Will stepped forward, positioning himself between Robert and Sarah and Emily. It's over, Robert. The police are on their way. Robert smiled, unperturbed. Are they? In this storm? I doubt they're prioritizing your corporate espionage claims when there are real emergencies happening across the city. Kidnapping a child is a real emergency, Sarah said, her arms tightening around Emily. Kidnapping, Robert laughed. I was helping a scared little girl find her mother who wasn't answering her phone. Who would believe otherwise? From the dining room, another figure appeared, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed despite the late hour and storm. Robert, what's going on here? He asked, his tone commanding. Just some unexpected guests, Mr. Hartwell, Robert replied. Will Parker and one of our former employees. Hartwell's eyes narrowed as he assessed Will. So this is the wunderkind who built Parker Culinary from nothing. Impressive, if a bit foolhardy. He turned to Robert. You said you had everything under control. A minor complication, Robert assured him. They have no proof of anything. Will pulled out his phone. Actually, we do. My IT team has been monitoring your encrypted communications. We know everything about your Seattle strategy and how you've been manipulating this restaurant's performance to drive down its value for acquisition. It was a bluff. They had fragments of evidence, but nothing comprehensive enough for an ironclad case. But the flash of uncertainty that crossed Hartwell's face suggested the bluff might work. Baseless accusations, Hartwell said dismissively, though with less confidence. If you had any real evidence, you'd have gone to the authorities. Already. We did, Will countered. They're on their way, but I wanted to see for myself the men who would threaten a child to advance their corporate agenda. Hartwell's head snapped toward Robert. What is he talking about? What child? Robert shifted uncomfortably. A necessary precaution, the mother, was becoming problematic. You used my daughter, Sarah said, her voice shaking with fury. You frightened her and lied to her. I didn't hurt her, Robert insisted, glancing nervously at Hartwell. Hartwell's expression had darkened. We agreed. No unnecessary risks, nothing that could lead to criminal charges. Corporate espionage is a civil matter, but involving a child? He shook his head, backing away from Robert. This isn't what I signed on for. Will saw the opening and pressed his advantage. It's not too late to mitigate the damage, Mr. Hartwell. Cooperate with the investigation. Testify against. Robert and the courts will look more favorably on your case. Don't listen to him, Robert urged. He's bluffing. There is no investigation. As if on cue, Will's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Security camera access restored. Recording everything. Police 5 minutes out. Will held up the phone, so both men could see the message. Last chance, gentlemen. The smart play is to surrender peacefully. Hartwell's corporate instinct for self-preservation kicked in. I was misled about the nature of this operation, he said quickly. Robert assured me this was standard competitive intelligence gathering. I had no knowledge of any threats or intimidation, especially involving children. You backstabbing coward, Robert snarled, his carefully maintained facade crumbling. After everything I did for you for Hartwell Group, which you helped run into the ground, Hartwell countered, I gave you a second chance at Midwest because you promised results. Not scandals, not kidnapping charges. The two men were so focused on their deteriorating alliance that they didn't notice Emily slipping from her mother's arms and edging toward the break room door. Stop arguing! The child suddenly shouted, her voice surprisingly commanding for someone so small. You're both bad guys, and my mom and Mr. Will are the good guys. My detective notebook proves it." All eyes turned to Emily, who stood defiantly, her blue notebook clutched to her chest. "Emily," Sarah said anxiously, reaching for her daughter. Robert moved suddenly, grabbing Emily's arm. "Let's see this famous notebook, shall we?" "Let her go." Sarah lunged forward, but Hartwell unexpectedly stepped between them. "Enough, Robert," he said firmly. "Release the child. Now, you've gone too far." Robert's face contorted with rage. "You're throwing me to the wolves, again, just like last time." In the distance, the wail of police sirens became audible over the storm. Robert's grip on Emily loosened just enough for the child to wrench free, scampering back to her mother. Will stepped forward, placing himself directly in front of Robert. "It's over," he said quietly. "Don't make this worse for yourself." For a moment, something dangerous flashed in Robert's eyes, the cornered look of a man with nothing to lose. Then abruptly, his shoulders slumped. "You have no idea what it's like," he said bitterly, "to give everything to a company, only to be discarded when convenient. Hartwell did it to me. You would have done the same eventually." "That's where you're wrong," Will replied. "My company is built on valuing people, not using them. That's the fundamental difference between us, Robert." The sirens grew louder, police lights now visible through the rain-streaked windows. Hartwell had already moved toward the front door, ready to present himself to the authorities in the most favorable light possible. As the first officers entered the restaurant, Will turned to Sarah and Emily, who clung to each other with relieved exhaustion. "Are you both okay?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, too overwhelmed for words. Emily, however, looked up at Will with solemn blue eyes. "My detective club solved the case," she said seriously. Will knelt to her level, smiling gently. "It absolutely did, Detective Emily. You're the hero of this story." "What happens now?" Sarah asked as officers began securing the scene, separating Robert and Hartwell for questioning. "Now," Will said, taking her hand, "we rebuild, together, if you'll let me." The look Sarah gave him was complex, gratitude and relief mixed with something deeper, something that had been growing between them through this shared ordeal. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the foundation upon which love could be built: trust, respect, and shared purpose. Outside, the storm began to subside, the pounding rain softening to a gentle patter as the first officers approached to take their statements. Chapter 7. A Family Recipe. 6 months later, the Seattle skyline sparkled. Under a rare cloudless spring day, Harvest Table hummed with activity as staff prepared for the evening's special event. The restaurant had undergone a transformation, not just in decor, with its refreshed living herb wall and warm copper accents polished to a high shine, but in spirit. Sarah moved through the dining room, checking each table arrangement with meticulous care. As the newly appointed assistant manager, she took her responsibilities seriously, especially today. "Mom, is this straight?" Emily called from across the room, where she was positioning a hand-lettered sign reading, "Grand Reopening Celebration." "Perfect. Sweetie," Sarah assured her. At 7 years old, Emily had grown an inch taller and worlds more confident in the month since that stormy night. Her detective club had evolved into a genuine interest in business operations, with Will patiently explaining everything from inventory management to customer service principles. The kitchen doors swung open as Chef Marcus emerged, wiping his hands on his apron. "Appetizers are ready, Sarah, and may I say your suggested menu additions have been a hit with the test group." Sarah smiled, still not entirely used to having her ideas valued and implemented. "Thanks, Marcus." Will thought the Northwest Mediterranean fusion concept would appeal to the neighborhood demographics. "Will thought right," Marcus agreed. "Speaking of our fearless leader, where is he?" "Conference call with the board," Sarah replied. "Finalizing the employee stock ownership plan before tonight's announcement." The aftermath of the Harvest Table conspiracy, as the business press had dubbed it, had been transformative for Parker Culinary Group. Robert Donovan and James Hartwell had both faced serious consequences. Robert for harassment, intimidation, and reckless endangerment of a minor, Hartwell for corporate espionage and attempted fraud. The investigation had uncovered similar schemes at restaurants across the country, leading to a broader industry reckoning about ethical business practices. For Will, the experience had prompted a fundamental re-evaluation of his company's values and structure. The new employee stock ownership plan was just the beginning of changes designed to ensure that every worker had a stake in the company's success. As Sarah checked her watch, her engagement ring caught the light, a simple but elegant diamond that Will had presented to her just 1 month ago, after a careful courtship that prioritized Emily's comfort above all else. The transition from employer-employee to equals had taken time and conscious effort. Will had insisted Sarah finish her long-deferred business degree, which she now attended part-time while working at the restaurant. Their relationship had developed naturally, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than rushed passion. "Sarah?" Will's voice came from the entrance, where he stood in one of his impeccably tailored suits, his expression brightening at the sight of her. "Everything looks amazing." "We're almost ready," she confirmed, moving to meet him. "How was the board meeting?" "Unanimous approval," Will said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "The ESOP is official. Starting tonight, every employee with 1 year of service becomes a part owner of Parker Culinary Group." Sarah squeezed his hand. "They're going to be thrilled, especially Marcus. He's been here since the beginning." "I couldn't have done it without you," Will said softly. "Your perspective changed how I see this entire company." Before Sarah could respond, Emily bounded up to them, her blue notebook, now filled with restaurant observations rather than detective notes, clutched in her hands. "Mr. Will, I finished the guest welcome speech. Want to hear it?" Will crouched to her level, a gesture that had become natural to him. "Absolutely, Detective Emily." Sarah watched as her daughter solemnly read her carefully prepared speech, Will nodding with genuine interest and offering gentle suggestions. The sight still amazed her sometimes. This powerful CEO who commanded a culinary empire, treating her daughter's thoughts with the same seriousness he gave to board members. "That's perfect," Will told Emily when she finished. "Just remember to speak slowly and clearly like we practiced." Emily nodded seriously before running off to continue her preparations for the evening. "She's something special," Will said, watching her go. "She is," Sarah agreed. "And she adores you. Do you know she told Mrs. Castillo that she has the best almost dad in the world?" Will's eyes softened. "Almost dad, huh? I'll take it. For now." The journey to this point hadn't been simple. Sarah had initially hesitated to pursue a relationship with Will, concerned about the power imbalance and what people might think. Will had respected her caution, focusing first on rebuilding the restaurant and establishing her in a role that reflected her capabilities rather than their personal connection. Their first real date hadn't occurred until 3 months after the confrontation with Robert and Hartwell, a simple dinner at a neighborhood restaurant where neither of them was known. Emily had been included in many of their outings, Will insisting that they function as a unit from the beginning. "The first guests will arrive in an hour," Sarah noted, checking her watch again. "I should make sure the staff is briefed on tonight's announcements." "Before you go," Will said, taking her hand, "there's something I wanted to ask you. If it's about the seating chart, I've triple-checked it. The food critics are separated from the investors, as requested." Will smiled. "Not about the seating chart. About us, you, me, and Emily." Sarah's heart quickened. "What about us?" "I know we agreed to wait until after the wedding to discuss living arrangements, but I was thinking..." He was interrupted by the arrival of Olivia Chen, who hurried through the front door with an apologetic expression. "Sorry to interrupt, lovebirds, but the media is setting up outside, and the mayor's office called to confirm her speech time." Will sighed good-naturedly. "We'll continue this conversation later," he promised Sarah before turning to Olivia. "Tell the press we'll do a brief Q&A before the event, but no photographs inside until guests arrive." As the evening approached, Harvest Table transformed from a restaurant into a celebration venue. Staff members, many of whom had weathered the difficult period under Robert's management, moved with renewed purpose, now understanding they were building something they would partially own. The first guests began arriving at 7 o'clock, local, dignitaries, business partners, loyal customers, and selected media. Emily, dressed in a blue dress that matched her eyes, stood proudly by the door, greeting each arrival with a confidence that belied her age. At precisely 7:30, Will clinked a glass for attention, standing at the center of the restaurant, with Sarah and Emily beside him. "Welcome everyone to the new harvest table," he began. 6 months ago, this restaurant faced its darkest hour, not because of market forces or changing tastes, but because we lost sight of what truly makes a restaurant successful: its people. The room quieted as he continued. "Tonight marks not just a reopening, but a recommitment to the values that should have always guided us: integrity, community, and shared success. Starting today, Parker Culinary Group is transitioning to an employee ownership model, where every person who contributes to our success shares in the rewards." Murmurs of surprise and approval rippled through the crowd as Will explained the details of the plan. Sarah watched the faces of the staff, the disbelief transforming to joy as they realized the announcement was real. "None of this would have been possible without two very special people," Will continued, his voice softening, as he turned to Sarah and Emily. "A mother and daughter who showed extraordinary courage in exposing wrongdoing, and who reminded me why I started this company in the first place. Not to build an empire, but to create a family." Emily beamed at the recognition, while Sarah felt tears threatening. The journey from overworked, underappreciated server to respected manager and Will's fiancée sometimes felt surreal. "And now," Will said, "I believe Emily has a few words to share." Emily stepped forward, her blue notebook open to her prepared remarks, but instead of reading from it, she closed the book and spoke from her heart. "When I started my detective club, I was just playing a game, but I learned that even kids can make a big difference when they pay attention and tell the truth." She looked up at Will and then at her mother. "I also learned that families come in lots of different ways. Sometimes they start with just a mom who works really hard, and sometimes they grow when you meet someone who fits with you like the perfect recipe." The crowd chuckled appreciatively at her culinary metaphor, clearly influenced by her time around the restaurant. "Mr. Will is going to be my dad soon, and he already makes my mom smile a lot more than she used to, and he taught me that business isn't just about money, it's about taking care of people." Emily concluded with the wisdom of a child who had seen both the worst and best of human behavior. "Thank you for coming to our family restaurant." The applause was thunderous as Emily returned to her mother's side, accepting hugs from both Sarah and Will. As the formal program concluded and guests began enjoying the culinary delights prepared by Chef Marcus and his team, Will guided Sarah and Emily to a quiet corner. "That was quite a speech, Emily," he said, genuine pride in his voice. "Completely off script and absolutely perfect." "I decided scripts are boring," Emily declared. "Real detectives have to be spontaneous." "A wise philosophy," Will agreed solemnly. "Can I go see if Chef Marcus needs help with the dessert presentation?" Emily asked, already eyeing the kitchen. "Just don't get in the way," Sarah cautioned, watching as her daughter scampered off, somehow navigating the crowded room without disturbing a single guest. Alone for a moment, Will turned to Sarah. "About what I was trying to ask earlier." "Yes," Sarah said simply. Will blinked. "Yes, but you don't know what I was going to ask." "You were going to ask if Emily and I would consider moving into your penthouse before the wedding instead of waiting," Sarah said with a knowing smile. "Emily's been dropping hints about the view for weeks." "Actually," Will said, taking her hands in his, "I was going to suggest I move into your apartment instead." Now it was Sarah's turn to be surprised. "My tiny two-bedroom walk-up? Why would you want that?" "Because it's Emily's home, the only one she's known. And because I don't want to be the rich guy who swoops in and changes everything. I thought we could take it slowly. Keep your place for now. Eventually find a new home together that belongs to all of us equally." Sarah's heart swelled at his thoughtfulness. "That's incredibly sweet, but completely impractical. Your suits alone would take up our entire closet space." Will laughed. "I can simplify." And your morning conference calls would wake the entire building. Those walls are paper thin. I'll whisper. Sarah shook her head, smiling. How about a compromise? We find a new place together, not your penthouse, not my apartment. Something that's ours from the beginning. Deal, Will agreed immediately, as long as it has a room for Emily's detective club headquarters. And a decent kitchen, Sarah added. You are a culinary magnate, after all. Their laughter blended with the ambient sounds of the successful event. Clinking glasses, appreciative murmurs over exceptional food, the hum of a community being rebuilt. Across the room, Emily had positioned herself beside Chef Marcus, solemnly handing him garnishes for the dessert plates. The chef treated her assistants with the same seriousness he would give a culinary school extern, showing her the proper placement for each element. Look at her, Sarah said softly. 6 months ago she was hiding in the break room, afraid of what she'd discovered. Now she's thriving. Children are remarkably resilient, Will observed, and Emily is exceptional, even by those standards. She gets that from her mother, came a familiar voice as Olivia joined them, champagne flute in hand. Congratulations, you two. The event is a smashing success. The mayor is telling everyone this is a model for ethical business practices citywide. Thanks, Olivia, Will said. None of this would have happened without your support during the investigation. Speaking of which, Olivia continued, lowering her voice, I just received word that Robert Donovan's sentencing is scheduled for next month. His lawyer is pushing for probation, but with the evidence we gathered, he's looking at actual time. Sarah's expression grew serious. I still don't understand how he could threaten a child. Desperation, Will said simply. He felt betrayed by the corporate world and was determined to get revenge no matter the cost. Well, the cost was his freedom and reputation, Olivia noted. And speaking of costs, the final numbers came. In for the employee ownership transition. The lawyers say it's the most generous ESOP structure they've ever seen. Will shrugged. It was the right thing to do. This company was built by its people. They deserve to share in its success. As Olivia moved on to speak with other guests, Sarah leaned against Will's shoulder. When did you become such a progressive business leader? I think it started the moment a 6-year-old detective handed me a note in a restaurant, Will replied, his arm slipping around her waist. Some lessons come from unexpected teachers. The evening continued, a perfect blend of celebration and new beginnings. As midnight approached, the last guests departed, leaving only staff and family. Chef Marcus raised a final toast to the assembled team. To Harvest Table, reborn stronger than ever, and to Will and Sarah, proof that sometimes a crisis brings us exactly what we need. Emily, fighting sleep, but determined to last until the official end, tugged on Will's sleeve. Does this mean our detective case is closed? She asked, yawning. Will knelt beside her as he always did when speaking with her. This case is closed, Detective Emily. But I have a feeling there will be many more adventures for us. As a family, she asked hopefully. As a family,